Right. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Welcome, a very warm welcome to our Women in Sectional Title webinar today. This is our 32nd event. So if you'd like to go back and look at our events page, you'll be able to view 32 webinars on different subjects. Again, this is brought to you by our really kind sponsors. Thank you to ZFIN, CIA, We Connect You, Sectional Title Solutions, and PKF Octagon.
And I've got unstable internet connection, really?
So today we're dealing with conflict in sectional title schemes. And I think it's really, really important for us to get involved with this subject because it affects all of you. Most of the people who register for most of the people who deal with these on the sectional title webinars are actually managing agents and portfolio managers. So I think that it's a good thing for you to listen to what our guest has got to say today. I'm really delighted, Bianca Toman, to introduce you again. Bianca is an industrial psychologist, and she is the co-founder and director at Further. Hi, Bianca. Thanks for joining us again.
Hi, Marina. Thanks so much for having me again. I really loved the discussion last time, so looking forward to a juicy one today on conflict.
Yes, absolutely. I think sometimes we need a break from all the legal stuff, and we need to get stuck into exactly what makes people tick. So brilliant. I want to focus on conflict, the various types of conflict, the common causes of conflict. So maybe you can just put it in context for us, and then we can focus on sectional title schemes.
Brilliant. Yeah, so I think conflict is something that most of us shy away from. It's got a really bad connotation of kind of thinking about people who are emotional and heated and screaming and not constructive. And that version of conflict certainly isn't.
Bianca, sorry, you've been muted. I can't hear you. Sorry, hold on. Unmute yourself. No, I still can't hear you. I'm not sure what happened here. Let's just see. I'm not on mute. I can't hear you. Sorry, just one moment, Bianca. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. Let's just see now if it works. We're having a few technical issues. Sorry, let me just go and forward. Hi, Bianca. Sorry, it's not from our side. There's something going on. No, we can't. No sound from you, Bianca. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you. You're clear, Marina.
We can hear you, Marina.
Okay, let Bianca rejoin. In the meantime, I think what we can discuss is maybe you've got some interesting examples of conflict in your scheme. For me personally, I think it's really every single day. As an attorney, we're seeing conflict all the time. I mean, there's no doubt, and it's getting worse. I think it's really getting worse because ultimately there's so many people who may be in dire socioeconomic circumstances. There might be people who are in arrears with their levies and are getting upset with other people who are trying to sue them. There are a whole host of issues that are contributing to the conflict. But maybe one or two of you could come up and tell us exactly how you're dealing with a conflict, or just give us a few examples of conflict in your experience. Oh, there's Bianca. Can we hear you, Bianca?
Yeah, yes. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. All right. Well, let's leave the questions and that for the end. So now we've got Bianca back.
Brilliant.
Okay, yeah. Put it in context for us, Bianca.
Great. So I actually don't know how much you heard from what I said before, so I'm just going to quickly do a bit of a recap. But
That's
really what I
fine.
said is that conflict has such a negative connotation, and I think we've all probably got experiences, specifically in your industry, where I think things are quite heated, where conflict is not experienced well. But a lot of the research shows that conflict is actually part of a really healthy team dynamic, because it means there's a space to voice disagreements. The big problem is that people don't actually know how to deal with conflict, how to have those conversations in a constructive way, and that's why it's got such a bad reputation. So when we talk a little bit about conflict today, I think there's a couple of like key themes that we have to keep in mind. Conflict really is when there's kind of a disagreement or a difference of interest or misalignment between any kind of person.
Oh no, it's gone off again, Bianca. Can't hear again. I'm not sure. It's not from our side, yeah. Not from our side, yeah, it's off again. Oh dear, I don't know. Bianca's battling with her sound. I'm really sorry. So maybe we can just go to one or two people. I don't know, Serena, if you'd like to tell us how you guys deal with conflict, if you're there.
Sorry, Marina. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I was actually talking and I didn't realize that there was no sound. So yeah, I think the whole problem is and started almost after COVID. I think we all sort of suffering with a bit of PTSD.
Yes.
COVID, especially in KZN, COVID, the riots, everybody's personality seems to have changed somewhat. The level of tolerance is very low. And so, yeah, we've had, but I find, without going into examples, and obviously I want Bianca to take over, I think a lot of the people, a lot of the owners just want to be heard. They just want to have somebody to listen while they vent on the phone or come into your office and have their say, and you listen to them and you sort of understand, and they go away feeling a little bit more relaxed because they think that somebody's heard them, you know, and they've got a way forward. And I think that's the problem. It's like this pent up. And I really do think that's, yeah, but I'm going to hand over to Bianca. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. I've joined from my phone, so I don't know what was happening with my laptop there. So yeah, you got me on my phone. Can you guys all hear me okay, Marina? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
okay,
all good. All good.
So sorry, it's not a webinar without a few tech issues, but on we go. So yeah, it's totally aligned to what Serena was saying around people being heard. And that's why when we talk about conflict, there's a few things that we can't not talk about. So the first is communication, and how we communicate. And when we think about this, the most important thing for me, and I always think it, we cannot control how other people respond. We cannot control how emotional or angry they are or what they say. All we can control is our actions, and all we can control is what we say and how we say it and how we listen. So conflict really is an exercise in understanding what is in your control versus what is not in your control, and you kind of have to deal with in the appropriate way. So we talk about kind of, I always think of Covey's circles of control and influence. If you've read his book, you'll know what I'm talking about. But he says, focus on what you can control and influence. So what can you have direct control over? And the rest is in your circle of concern. You can be worried about it and it can affect you, but you can't actually control it. So don't give it more energy than you need to. And the second piece is around active listening, which is I think what Serena was, yeah, exactly, Sandra, that diagram of control is exactly it. So I think what Serena was saying was around that active listening being so important. People really want to feel heard. And in being heard, you don't have to agree with someone. You just have to acknowledge their feelings. And I think sometimes there's a confusion between those two things. People think that when you are acknowledging how someone feels, you're agreeing with them, which can sometimes be risky from a workplace perspective. But actually what it is it's saying, I can hear that this is frustrating for you. I can hear that you must be angry, and I'm like, sorry that you feel that way. And then there's a kind of a few models of conflict and how you can handle conflict, which we can get into with the specifics, Marina, of kind of the examples, but those are the principles that I'll talk to and illustrate kind of through the examples or through your coming questions.
Okay, great. So we've got a couple of permutations in sectional title with the different players, different role players. So we've got owners, trustees, managing agents. So let's start with owners. Say we've got an example of neighbor conflict, and that's huge at the moment. So you've got neighbors. I've got a neighbor, for example, who plays their music loud 5 times a week and only switches it off at 3 o'clock in the morning. That kind of dispute, or even a neighbor who's on top of me and there's water ingress coming from the top and leaking into my unit. You know, those kind of disputes are exceptionally personal. How would we look at coping with that as owners?
Perfect. So the general rule with conflict and communication is if you're feeling activated, if you're feeling very emotional, very angry, very frustrated, it's not the best time to communicate, because you are not going to communicate in the most constructive way to resolve those issues. So as difficult as it is to like kind of get your energy levels to a place where you know you can be constructive, it's kind of start there. So take a beat, feel frustrated, and then it's around communicating in the right way around kind of what the issue is and what impact it's having. So in this instance, we'd look at kind of the rules in the building. So if there are like particular rules around like music and all that sort of stuff and guidelines, refer, you've got something in your kind of corner that helps to, I suppose, like moderate or mediate these sorts of discussions. So always try to go back to what the agreement is, because that agreement will help make the conversation constructive. And if that isn't, just to have like a really human conversation. So when you're in a difficult spot, I always ask myself, how would I want someone to come talk to me about this issue? And then I do it in that way. So I'll always be kind. I'll always, you know, say, I'm not sure if it's on purpose and I just want to bring your attention to something, but this is kind of the issues. Can you come to the party? What do you recommend? And treat it like you would any other relationship. It's a conversation and it's a communication. And I think the problem comes in is when you're dismissed. And the person dismisses your very genuine and legitimate concern, or if the person doesn't make a change to the behavior, and that's when I would escalate. I don't think you have to take it on if you're an owner yourself.
Okay, so firstly, you're not going to go rushing around at 1 o'clock in the morning, bashing on that person's door, telling them to immediately desist with their behavior, and it's ridiculous. You're not going to do that, but you are recommending like a face-to-face situation, because I've also noticed that people become these keyboard warriors and the tone of emails is so poor, and I would get annoyed if I got a lot of those emails. So a face-to-face, but not at the time when the conflict is happening.
If you want to get to sleep at 1 and pop a text really loud, please will you turn it down? We'll chat tomorrow about this. But I think we all learned it in COVID when you were all of a sudden emailing and then people were getting offended because there's tone lost in email. But then similarly, as you said, people have the sense of like bravery among might not have to your. So just having that human to human adult conversation is, in my experience with conflict, the best way to kind of, and just to, like I said, you control your stuff. So like, obviously just put your best foot forward, like behave in the way that you'd want people to behave with you.
I'll never forget the once my daughter was on mini city council, and they had something called a dignity conference, and it was just about teaching the girls to treat people with the dignity that they deserve, the respect that they deserve. And I remember it having such an impact. It would be wonderful to have that kind of course, you know, how to teach people or treat people with dignity, because then it'll just kind of come back to you. But what about now we're talking about an owner who's driving the managing agent crazy? And I think a lot of our portfolio managers will be able to relate to this. Not even a trustee. This is just an owner who insults the managing agent, who doesn't think the managing agent can do their job properly. You know, and then again, you're on the phone, you're also on computer, and managing agents, Bianca, they don't have time to sit and you know, go talk to every single person. So as a portfolio manager, how do you cope?
So I think the first thing is like there are people who speak to people horrifically, and I think this is one of the industries where that does happen a lot more than in other industries, where there's almost like this entitlement that they can like throw words quickly throw around in like a workplace setting or conversation. So that I think is not okay. And speaking to kind of your colleagues, your company around what are our parameters to be able to have these conversations. If someone's swearing at me, what is our company policy on this? What are we entitled to do or not do? So I think that's really important, because that will give you like kind of impetus in the conversation. And I think what I've seen works really well in those instances is active listening. And basically what active listening is when you suspend your own agenda. So you're frustrated, you've got this like rude person on the phone, you suspend your agenda because you actually want to tell them, I don't want to be spoken to like this. Call me when you're in a better space, but like you can't really say that sometimes. So listening to not the issues, but what the person's feeling, and saying, person X, you sound really frustrated. I totally understand why you are frustrated. This is what I can do to help you. The rest is outside of my hands. Let me think about how I can get back to you. And kind of just making it around making the person's feelings feel heard, without necessarily saying that they're right. Because I know on some of these things, people aren't always right and they kind of complain about things they shouldn't. And if you feel like you're not getting anywhere in the conversation, feel like they always say in psychology that you're entitled to take a time out. And I don't mean that in like a patronizing way, but you're entitled to say, listen, I hear you. I know this is urgent. Give me 15 minutes, 30 minutes to think about it, look into some stuff, and I'll get back to you. And that is you taking that time out for yourself, removing yourself from that situation and giving that angry person the opportunity to simmer down and hoping that they do. So when things are getting you can remove yourself in a tactical and tactful way so that you don't end up causing more conflict. But I always think, yeah, just give yourself the space to breathe so you don't have to deal with that highly aggressive person.
Can I also just at this point in time put a question out to everybody, just to say, if you're a portfolio manager and you're working in a managing agency, you know, I want you to think about whether or not your boss or the people above you, your management, do they support you? You know, do they support you if you get a very difficult, obstructive, intractable client who is shouting and performing? Because I must say, in our field as lawyers, if somebody speaks to my secretary in a really bad way, or if somebody speaks to one of our staff in a really, really bad way, and I mean bad, I mean not irritated, but ugly. As a boss, I think it's important to also get involved, to place those parameters and to protect portfolio managers who can often be young women who might not want to stand up to a bully.
Also, Marina, in some of our call center clients, the call center has policies around those things. So as soon as there's a swear word, as soon as there's like really unacceptable behavior, they support to say like, our company policy is that we don't talk to customers when they're like this. We will get back to you soon. I think that's what you've said. It comes to kind of, we all spoken to with dignity, no matter how cross someone else is. They're allowed to be cross, they're not allowed to speak fully.
Yes, absolutely. I think again, then we're talking about trustees. Now, say the trustees on a group, and you know there's disagreement and conflict about how to administer the affairs of the body corporate. And I mean, that's like any business, in directors or partners or whatever in a business, you know, you might be in conflict. So there again, most of the time trustees are in meetings together and in person nowadays. So yeah, talk us through that, because that's just a different level, you know.
So when we look at conflict, there's 5 different types of like conflict style, and it's worth thinking about which block you settle into, because it'll impact the outcome. So there's the avoidant conflict style, and that's when someone doesn't want to engage, they just want the issue to be over. So they kind of don't talk about things, they don't put their needs forward, they don't negotiate or talk about their perspective. And the problem with that avoidance style is actually nothing ends up getting done, and nothing is resolved because the person hasn't perspective forward, or their ideas forward, or fought for their perspective, and then it ends up coming up, you know, like whack-a-mole. If you don't like really deal with it, it just comes up in other places. That's not helpful or constructive. The other one is like very, very assertive and aggressive. And that is where you want to win at all costs. And how you see conflict is that there's one winner and everyone else is losers. And the problem with that perspective is you go in so aggressive with what you want to do, you're actually not listening. So there's no active listening around what are the other needs around people. There's no room to negotiate because any kind of deviation from what you want is losing. And you've got a clear winner and a clear loser. And that's also not very constructive. It doesn't make people feel good. You then kind of got the people who seek more consensus. So there are people who are just really wanting to agree with you. So it's different to avoidant. Avoidant doesn't talk about conflict. These people who are kind of just wanting to make it go away by agreeing, like, yes, I agree. Yes, I agree. Totally. Yeah. But they lose. So in that version of that conflict, there are winners and losers. And you, the person who's not standing up and engaging around the issues that matter, you become the loser because you don't put your needs on the table and you don't talk about your perspective. And then the two most constructive versions of conflict are obviously when you manage the assertiveness and the kind of desire to reach a middle ground. So there's two. The one is where you are collectively wanting to work towards the same outcome. So you all work together to come towards an agreement, right? So that is like often what happens in teams. You've all got the same goal at the end. You all put your ideas forward and you all build something together. So no one really loses and no one really wins because you're actually agreeing during the process. That's quite rare. It happens a lot in teams that have gone through conflict before, which is healthy. And then the most typical way that conflict shows up is that we all win a little, we all lose a little. You guys have all heard of that. Like a good negotiation and the end of a good conflict is everyone has yielded something and everyone has won something. And that is probably the most healthy form of conflict because what it means is that there's space for disagreement. It's not all yes, 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 yes. There's also not all no, 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 no. The way that that conflict works is you put the end goal on the table. You allow everyone around the table to have a voice and voice their disagreements. And then you go by means of, okay, who are the primary decision makers here? Let's reach a consensus. Those negotiations and those conflicts, people don't always leave feeling very happy, but that's because they've given up something. And that's often the mark of like when something's gone well. Those are helpful theoretically. And I think you'll see in practice who you're dealing with around the table. It's hardest to deal with an assertive person who does not want to yield. Because there, what you've got is someone who's not prepared to listen to you, and it can be extraordinarily frustrating. And when we're dealing with conflict, we're dealing with people. If someone doesn't want to yield, you cannot force the behavior. You've got to try and find another way around it. So
can I ask you, Bianca, and it might sound a little bit odd, but you know, when you get recruited as an employee or even you get placed on a board or a committee, in the corporate world, you're often asked to complete a psychometric test. And for me, as I get older, I realize that there's so many different personality types that it might be exceptionally prejudicial to have too many of the same type of personalities on a committee, because you don't have the worker or the quiet one. You've got 8 or 6 really difficult people who are all A-type personalities and you don't want to know. So that might be something to look at going forward for body corporates. I mean, I don't know if it would ever work out, but I certainly think it might be helpful.
So totally, we see that a lot. A lot of the time, people who are called influencers, they have a strong influence profile. So they're going to influence through relationships, through communication, or through leadership. They are often in those positions, kind of sitting around that table. But the problem is that influencers like to be the only influencer, and then they're in a room with several influencers, and then they're all vying to be like the person, the influencer. And I think in those personality assessments, I use them a lot and they need to be used for the right purpose. What you really want to look for is a couple of criteria: a comfort and a confidence to challenge ideas. If I can feel trusted and safe to like challenge ideas in an appropriate way, we're going to get to a good outcome. But what's got to balance that is a receptiveness to feedback. If I can't hear what other people are saying and I'm too busy challenging, those people are inevitably very difficult to work with. And they're often people who you'll know if you've worked with someone like that. They're very comfortable to challenge, but as soon as you direct that back at them and you need them to reflect, think, listen, and then make improvements, they all of a sudden struggle. Those are difficult personalities to deal with. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I've been in many meetings where I've been in meetings with the managing agent or the portfolio manager together with the committee of trustees. And the one thing that I found really helps the portfolio manager is if they're knowledgeable. The minute you're knowledgeable about something, it places you into a different category, and all of a sudden you gain a bit more respect from those kind of tough trustees, because these trustees, some of them are in very high business positions. Some of them are top kind of caliber people who, can easily fob off somebody who they perceive as weak or perceive as, as not knowing enough. So if you know about your own game, that is such a positive and powerful way to address these things. Also, managing agents, Bianca, they walk a tightrope, because they have to be nice to the trustees, because the trustees have basically appointed them as managing agents. So what if a managing agent, portfolio managers there's something really, really difficult that is coming up, and there's going to be a conflict. And you've got to keep in with the managing agent, you've got to keep in with the trustees rather. And how would you deal with that? So
I think what's most important is to understand the sort of person that you're dealing with, and it's not going to be a one size fits all. But my general advice to people when they're in a position where with someone who's appointed them, be that their employer or a leader, whoever that may be, and the person's in disagreement, you can just use the framework to sit them down, grab a coffee and say, I value and respect you hugely, but I need to give you some feedback, and I hope you can kind of take it from where it comes. It's coming from a good place. And then kind of start by giving context. So X, Y, Z happened. Then go down to the specifics of the situation. ABC made me feel uncomfortable. And really, I wanted your input. Like, I wanted to share this with you because I value our relationship and I want your input. What do you think? As soon as it stops becoming an accusation and becomes a conversation, like 8 times out of 10, I would say, even the most difficult people. And then if they shut you down there and say, actually, it doesn't bother me at all, like, cool, you've done your bit, and that you've attempted to come forward on something that's important for you. You've started it as a conversation, not an accusation. And either you're going to have an amazing conversation with the person, or it's going that doesn't really bother me, and you move on. I've seen that work, starting with the context, then going to the specifics and inviting input, and it being a conversation, not an accusation.
So I also find, even in a law firm context, that a lot of the younger attorneys are they're averse to a telephone call. So it's almost like they don't want to pick up the phone to deal with a difficult client. They would rather just email and, just keep behind the computer. Maybe I'm old school, but I honestly think sometimes just picking up the phone and speaking to somebody as a portfolio manager it just sort of, it diffuses the situation, it's not as, you're talking to another human.
Absolutely. So much gets lost in translation and writing. People imply. So like sometimes I laugh in our office, like someone will be like, can you believe this email? And they read it with this attitude. And I'm like, but you read it like this. Does it sound so bad? They're like, no. So like, you don't know how it was typed. So don't receive it in a way that's like, maybe a bit like passive aggressive, like you inferring your own tone in the email, and that's why it really does get lost in writing. Those sorts of conversations, by my rule is difficult conversations need to happen either over a cup of coffee or on the phone. Like those are the two ways you have hard conversations. Those are the ways.
Yeah, that's another thing. This cup of coffee works in a big way. It really, really does. Not even, so if you're a managing agent or portfolio manager, going into sort of an objective space. So, it's a neutral space, not the complex, and it's not the office. It's just somewhere else to say, look, I'm not enjoying the way that, that your tone or whatever, we need to work together. And I really want to see how we can work together. And that's the same with clients. Even with my managing agent clients, there's sometimes when there's something that's really bothering me about our relationship, in that it's just become tough and tricky and hard to navigate, and rather just get out of that and say, listen, we're both busy, we both, it's difficult for both of us, but let's just talk about it, because we are human beings at the end of the day.
No, Marina, the one thing I've learned in my career, I've also worked with some really incredible people, but some extraordinarily difficult people, is that it takes courage to be honest, and it takes courage to have like a conversation that feels hard. But most of the times, once you've had it, that person respects you more, because they're like, they is not scared of me. They're prepared to have like a respectful conversation with me, and it often makes the relationship so much better. But it's not, you don't know how the person's going to respond. Are they going to fire me? Are they going to get cross with me? Are they going to scream at me? Like, I think it's human nature to like go down the rabbit hole of how poorly the conversation can go. But if you handle it well with like respect, you don't get kind of cross, and you just have a conversation, the person will often actually have a lot of respect for you for handling the conversation in that way, is what I found.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think being in conflict with somebody is actually an opportunity. It's a marketing opportunity. It's an opportunity for you to market yourself and how well you actually can deal with something. But let's be a bit realistic now about a few things. There are certain people in sectional title complexes who are not rational, that we know. Absolutely unequivocally can say that after 26 years in this industry. And those are the kind of people who might even bring with them some sort of mental health issue. The people who you're not going to be able to get to, you're not going to be able to rationalize with. And that's a whole new way of dealing with something. So what is your opinion on the whole mental health situation at the moment? I'm sure you're seeing a lot more of it in the workplace.
Yeah, totally. I think some of the people who come forward, and I think I can even think of the kind of the complex I live in now. One of the neighbors wanted to call the police because the other neighbor's child was autistic and was loud, and it was just like the person was totally irrational. Like this child, like there was nothing happening. Like it was just terrible. And I think when it comes to those things and dealing with people who are aggressive and they don't understand, there are those people in the world. I think you must refer to rules and don't have expectations that that person will come to the party in any constructive way. You listen, you refer to the rules, you put boundaries in place, and you kind of go at those people with a sense of like, these are what the rules say, these are what the rules say, these are what the rules say. Because any engagement with a person like that is like stoking a flame. It's like very, very difficult to have a constructive conversation with someone who's here, like hot all the time. It's going to make it worse. So you either wait for them to simmer, if they ever have if they have a simmer, you wait for them to simmer, and then you say, listen, we can't communicate like that. Let's just think of a way that works on how we talk about these things. If they don't simmer, you keep it very much what's in the documents, you beef up your documentation, your policies, your procedures, and you really, I know the position that some of you guys are in, and I know some of the personalities you have to deal with, and it is not fair for me to say to you, like, keep trying, just keep going to them. Like, it's, some people just, I always say you've got to decide what's your stuff and what's their stuff. You always treat people well. You always make sure their stuff is their stuff, and you can't fix them, you can't help them have a constructive conversations. You've just got to kind of do what you can to keep your distance and just put boundaries and rules and procedures in place. So
there's also a more dangerous side to this whole thing of conflict, because you've got people walking around with guns in complexes, and you've got certain unstable personalities. And I think it's the portfolio managers and trustees have to be alive to the fact that things can go badly wrong. It's not just a matter of silly neighbors and we kind of laugh about them and fob them off. There have been some circumstances which have been exceptionally serious during the course of my career, where people have committed suicide over issues in complexes, where people have been shot in complexes because, of disagreements and that kind of thing. So for me, the moment that a portfolio manager is feeling that kind of threat level, I think you have to get some help. I see Brenda, you said I had a woman jump off the 3rd floor. You had to go to the site at midnight. So there are these very, very difficult situations, and sometimes maybe a portfolio manager, a young portfolio manager without experience, doesn't have the skills to handle that. So there's a time to hand over to maybe somebody else at that point.
And Marina, a lot of those things that you're talking about, like having to be there when someone's ended their life, that's a trauma. So I think in our society, we think of like capital big T trauma. So you get big T trauma and little t trauma. We all think of like big T trauma as like really serious things that we're allowed to get upset about. But little t trauma, so like being called to where someone has their life, like even if you did not know that person, that is traumatic. That is a trauma that's going to sit with you. Being threatened by someone, that's a trauma. And I think we use around the word really loosely, or we think of it as only really serious terms, but those are things that you should seek support for, because it's scary and that's not a nice part of the job. So I think I've given a shout out before to Panda Mental Health app. It's really cool. They've got like forests where if you feel like work is hard, you feel like you're having to deal with something difficult, it's a free encourage for those. That's certainly not like part and parcel of like normal workplace things that you think you're going to be confronted with.
Shame, Brenda, I see all your posts there, and we're sorry that you've had to go through all that. It can happen. It can happen, and it depends sometimes on the types of complexes that you work in. Not always easy. What about another question I see here, the racist issue? And that is a big issue. We can deal with it because I think it is prevalent. You know, the race card is often pulled out on both sides. And that's something which I see more and more of our schemes to have to deal with, because there's diversity, there's different things in everybody's culture. And now, you know, one of the adjudicators in one of my adjudications at the Ombuds office said, the closer we live together, the further apart we are. And I think that is quite right. And it's not for everybody. One of the comments at the beginning said, not everyone has the temperament to live in complex. Absolutely right. But the racist issue, how do we deal with that conflict?
So I think that there's obviously, in the world that we live in, there's got to be like a zero tolerance policy to racism, homophobia, anything like that. Like it can't exist. So I think where there's commentary that's being made, or passive aggressive behavior that's made to feel uncomfortable, just kind of talk to your superiors about it, around like what that means, if you have any. Like that depends on the kind of role you play in this whole scenario. Like there's no space. It's totally okay to take a stance on those things and say like, absolutely not, I'm not okay with it. And I think when people, oh, but you don't understand my culture, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, there needs to be a curiosity from both sides. So I might not understand your culture, you might not understand my culture. Let's be curious and let's learn together, and let's understand, and let's respect each other's cultures, but understand that there's a set of rules in place that will govern how things happen. And we're all adults. If we've signed the rules and if we agree to the rules, we need to abide by the rules. So I think if you're in a position where you feel like someone is saying things to you, escalate. You do not, it's not acceptable. Whereas if someone says, and because you're X, Y, Z, you say, cool, let me be curious, help me understand, and let me help you understand me. And I think if we approach it a lot more with curiosity, I often think these things, yeah, they turn out better than you'd hope, because we're genuinely curious about those things.
At this point, I'd like to ask if anybody would like to ask Bianca a question regarding conflict that they're dealing with. You're very welcome to do so. We've got a couple of minutes left. You can actually come, unmute and ask if you'd like to, if there anybody wants to. Otherwise, we can continue.
Any questions then in the chat? Because I'm on my phone, they said separately.
Yeah, just have a look. While Bianca's looking for that, there's something I just wanted to raise as well, and that is my experience with bullies, so that's owners and trustees, if there are problems in that complex, sometimes somebody will come to me. I mean, the other day, Shane, we had this little lady. She was literally shaking like a leaf when she was telling me about the trustees and how the trustees were treating her and fobbing her off, all alone in life, no family, nobody. She was really, really very sad little case. And she was petrified that by coming to us as attorneys, there'd be retribution in some form. And we're faced with that often. And I think even managing agents are faced with that often. And there's something which I think is important to know, that if you are feeling vulnerable or in the line of fire in any respect, even in your own private life, you can go and get a binding over of the peace order at the magistrate's court or in whichever jurisdiction you're in. And again, when somebody is magnified and when the courts are now involved and they know that other people are watching, for me, that's a powerful tool, because then they, suddenly back off. And all of a sudden, when you put a magnifying glass, it's like putting a magnifying glass on a sort of cockroach and it just scurries away, because all of a sudden now other people know about it. So that might also be quite a useful tool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
sometimes
thanks.
People are difficult. Like in the conversation we've had today, that it's all of this conflict resolution stuff is based on the premise you're dealing with a reasonable, rational person. If that premise is significantly more difficult because you can't predict their behaviors or actions. I see we have two. Right. Joanne, do you want to go first? Oh, sorry,
Joanne, just unmute yourself. There we
Can
go.
you hear me now? Fantastic.
Yes, hi,
Thank you
Joanne.
always to everyone, and thanks again. Hi, Marina, and thank you to you. I think the situation in conflict has a very core problem, especially in sectional title, because there's so often a group of people and owners and residents, not only owners, that actually are willing to follow the law and live within the rules. And as you say, good fences make for good neighbors. And then there is often the group that don't want to do that and they want to continue to do as they please. And when people like that are in a position of trustee and they have a managing agent, which unfortunately often enables them or doesn't speak up for the owners that are wanting to do the correct thing, it's a big problem. And personality types, as we've been told now, they vary broadly, but they can move from bullying, or the new word narcissistic type personality types, to those people that don't like conflict at all. And as you say, this older lady felt extremely nervous actually where she is. And this is our homes. It's not just our investments, but it is our investments, and often largest investments. So when things are not done according to the law and we see our investments dwindling and your life actually being affected, hugely negatively impacted. I've happened that my name and unit number was incorrectly released, accusing me of things that I didn't do. And of course, it has had a huge impact on my life, never mind my situation as a whole in movement around the complex. And that's uncalled for. Yes, it affects your health. But it's totally uncalled for. There are very strong regulations that guide sectional title, and we all just need to respectfully work together. And I think that's what managing agents, I think they carry a lot of weight on their shoulders, but they also need to try and support the owners that are ignorant in the game. In other words, there are a lot of uninformed owners. I myself was uninformed for 2/3 of my time in sectional title, but I have been resented informing myself over the last few years. And I've stood as a trustee. I literally cannot work with people that continuously bully. So yes, it's a big problem. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Joanne. Who else is there? Anybody else asking a question? I'm happy to take it further for another 5 minutes, because we started off with a few technical hitches. So yeah, if there's anybody else who'd like. Yeah.
Marina, it's Andy here. Hope you're doing well. My question is, I think it's something that we could actually build into the changes to the Act, a section on trustee training and a bit of EQ, and making sure, sorry, let me put my camera on, making sure people are aware of what's out there, and just put like a section of EQ, being able to deal with people. If you can't handle people, go on a course, and if that doesn't work, then you can't be a trustee. It's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Sandy. Yeah, you know, I think it's so much more than just who wants to be a trustee at a meeting. You know, who wants to be a trustee? Put up your hand and you're a trustee all of a sudden. I mean, you could be a certified psychopath and nobody would know about it. So, and trust me, there have been a couple of certified psychopaths around in my day. But ultimately, the thing is, you don't want to be, you want to be in win-win situations. And all around the world, if I can put it this way, mediation is playing an increasingly important role. The mediations, the rehabilitative justice system. So in our courts, even our courts, we don't want to go for the jugular and punish anymore. It's not a punitive situation anymore. It's a situation where we need to rehabilitate people who are doing the wrong things and need to properly teach them instead of only looking at punishment and aggression and, you know, and all of that. So yeah, I think we've all got a lot to learn, and there've definitely been some really great teachable moments here today. Certainly things that I'm going to take and to remember. Bianca, are there any sort of parting shots that you'd like to leave us with?
And Linda have their hands up, but I don't know if we...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I can't see whose hands up. I'm not the host. So yeah, please do speak, unmute yourself and speak.
I think Caroline was before me.
Okay, Caroline.
Good morning. I think just a few comments and perhaps some input. I think from the onset, there seems to be a general lack of understanding or acceptance of people who buy into community schemes, that they are actually regulated by prescribed law and regulations, and they are quite resistant to having to, you know, live in their property in inverted commas according to law. So a lot of the resistance comes from then a lack of understanding. I often come across clients who say the body corporates are doing X, Y, Z, but they're actually owners. So first and foremost, they have no idea that they actually are the body corporates. The trustees defer to the managing agent, and these are not all generalizations, because there are certainly skilled trustees and managing agents, but there are unfortunately challenges as well, where trustees act with their personal agendas. They do not take their fiduciary duties seriously. And there are instances where there's actually ganging up in inverted commas amongst trustees, and even joining forces with managing agents in certain circumstances, where there's even implementation of things which are in contravention of the law, which they're actually supposed to be upholding. So first and foremost, there's definitely a lack of education generally. And Marina, you touched on a point which I think is very important, which is the mediation, where you have neutral, professional, skilled mediation, where there's somebody that's actually guiding in terms of what the law actually is. Because at the moment, there's almost two extremes. There are often misinformed trustees and managing agents, and then the extreme going to CSOS and the law, where, you know, even though there is mediation at CSOS, you know, it's still gone to that extreme where there's an opportunity for an education and a mediation process. So bullying and ganging up and implementation by the people like the trustees and managing agents who should be upholding the law is a big problem.
Thank you. That's, yeah, absolutely fantastic contribution. Thank you. Yeah, fully agreed.
And we've got Linda, then we'll wrap up.
Hi, thanks very much. I want to know, I'm chairman of a complex. I don't own in the complex. I was asked to come in and help out because there were two trustees who had been blocking all decisions that the owners had wanted done. I met extreme resistance and hostility, and they were backed by an owner. But I managed to explain to them the laws. I just sent them the law until eventually I said I will get a restraining order, because you're constantly harassing me. I was getting 30, 40 emails a week just telling me that I must resign because they're not happy with me as chairman. The 2 trustees voted me as chairman, and I'd say, well, if you don't like it, call a meeting of the trustees and vote me out. But the other trustees supported me, so they didn't have the numbers. So they have just been bullying me, you know, mercilessly. But I've got broad shoulders, water for duck's back. But now I've just received today, we sent out the notice of the AGM, and owners have asked to add on to the AGM agenda about bullying trustees. My opinion is this should be discussed at the AGM, because the owners need to understand, as someone said previously, your EQ. If you are a bully, you are certainly not a leader. You are certainly not, in my opinion, suitable to serve in the best interest of all owners. Can you advise me on that? Can we put an agenda item, and can we specifically name the trustees who the complaints? We are obviously going to investigate all the complaints. I need to have, you know, facts, not allegations. But if we do have the facts, because I've got enough proof to sink a ship, are we able to add that to the agenda for the AGM?
So my view is that I don't think that it's really an agenda item for an AGM at all. I think it needs to be dealt with offline. In other words, not at some sort of general meeting like that, because the meetings I've been to can just become complete bun fights, and it doesn't really, it's not in the interest of the integrity of the building. So I would rather deal with it offline, privately, and actually go, who are these people? Because not everybody's a bully. Who are the people who are bullying the trustees, and actually direct correspondence to them saying that this is
no, sorry, you're misunderstanding. The bullies are the trustees. The bullies are the trustees. Yes, okay. So I think it's important that the owners know. So if they are nominated for election, that the owners know. This has been an ongoing thing apparently for 6 years. That's why I was asked to come in and try and stop it.
Yes. Yeah, it's a difficult thing, because you're opening yourself up to, you know, defamation in a public space when you start saying that. You know, even if you've got evidence, I would rather not put it in that space at all. And I would rather deal specifically with the trustees, you know, who have been bullies, and deal with it again offline. People at the AGM, when you are nominating trustees and people who are standing up, you can certainly say factual things, but bullying is a little bit tough. To be accused of being a bully at an AGM, I'm not sure. I don't like the sound of it. I think it could be dealt with very differently, and I'm very happy for you to communicate with me in terms of how it should be dealt with.
What the one trustee did at the last AGM, he actually said that CSOS had ruled against one of the trustees and he was no longer eligible to serve as a trustee. The managing agent said, no, you've lodged a complaint, no, you know, they haven't made a ruling. The ruling was made, but I was not a trustee previously, so I wasn't copied in on that. This trustee contacts the managing agent, sends, CSOS have ruled in our favour, he must resign immediately. The managing agent contacts me. I said, well, I want to see the ruling. The ruling did not say that. The ruling said that their application was denied. But he circulated that to the managing agent, and he told all the owners. I mean, that is great dishonesty.
Yeah. No, I do think so, but that again it's a very specific kind of incident, and I think there's a way to deal with that, because that also involves dishonesty. So where there's dishonesty, then obviously that needs to be brought to the attention of the AGM. Jenny, I like what you said about maybe setting out the skills at the AGM of what it takes to be a trustee, what you're needing on your committee. You know, you need workers. You don't need people who are just going to faff around and hang on. But yeah, that's probably for another day. I think time has moved on. So I'd like to say thank you very much, Bianca. We really appreciate your insights. It's been a pleasure to have you here again. I think for May, what we're going to look at doing is having a representative from our sponsors to talk to us and advise us what's going on the ground in their particular areas of expertise. And then for June, we're looking at the guest by the name of Marlon Chevalier, who's talking to us about evictions and rentals and tenants. So thank you again. Please keep supporting us. We just want to get stronger and stronger so that we can also have a voice in our very special industry. Thank you again and take care until next time.